tuning in to another episode of First Down by CoachTools. I am here with Amir, who's from Frederick, Maryland. And today we're going to talk about managing stress as an athlete. So thanks for joining, Amir.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Amir, can you kick things off by telling the audience a little bit about yourself and how you help athletes and people manage their own stress?
Yeah, for sure. The short is, I was 9 years old when I decided I had to become a doctor. And the reason was I was in a village in Iran. We were traveling, my dad and I, and a woman had gone into labor and she was having complications. There were no doctors, no hospitals in this village. The woman ended up passing away in her husband's arms. And I witnessed that and decided I had to help. I had to become a doctor. 10 years later, I was a student at George Washington, and I was on my way to, going to medical school and pursuing that surgery route. And I came home and my dad had a big, thick neck brace on. He was under the influence of some heavy painkillers and he had pain shooting down his arms. He couldn't use his hands, limp and numb from the shoulders down in his arms.
Oh,
and we ended up going from doctor to doctor to try to figure out what's wrong with dad. And eventually we ended up in a neurosurgeon's office who said, you need surgery. He said, we're going to slice you open from the base of the head to the bottom of the neck. We're going to break and remove the bones, put rods and screws on the sides, fuse your whole neck. You'll never turn your head again, and you may not regain function of your hands, and there's a chance you'll die because you're old. Dad was 70 at the time. So we talked to 3 surgeons. Then we got in a taxi to go home. In the taxi driver looked at my dad in as much pain as he was in. He said, sir, I know you asked me to take you home, but there's a chiropractor right down the street. I've heard he helps people like you. Do you want me to take you there? Long story short, we ended up in a chiropractor's office. The chiropractor talked my dad into doing chiropractic instead of surgery. Canceled the surgery. He went there for 6 months. At the end of 6 months, he had full use of his neck, full use of his hands, was able to turn his head, never needed surgery. He lived another 18 years. He lived to be 88 years old.
Wow.
He lived long enough to stand next to me as my best man when I got married. He lived long enough to meet my first son when he was born. And that's what got me into chiropractic, because I realized you can actually change things on the inside without cutting someone open. So I became a doctor of chiropractic. I've been practicing for 23 years. And one of the things that happened was every patient that came in, I won't say every patient, but a lot of patients who came in said, Doc, the reason I'm having so many problems is because of stress. I'm just too stressed out. And if I didn't have stress, I wouldn't have any problems. And so I would explain, here's what stress is. Here's how you deal with it. And it's about adaptability and being resilient, not about the stress in your life. And here's my point to everybody listening today, is how far you go, how successful you are in your sport or in your profession, how much you make, what you accomplish, all of that is 100% dependent on how much stress you are willing and able to handle. So if you want to be the best in your field, you want to be the GOAT, but you want to reduce stress, it's not going to work. That's not what the greats do. See, I've watched and studied these greats, the best athletes on the planet. They have a totally different definition of stress than the rest of the people.
Yeah.
They have a different relationship with stress than the rest of the people. And most importantly, none of them will ever focus on reducing stress. They thrive under stress. They invite it, embrace it, they adapt to it. Listen, if I go to the gym, let's say I'm going to the gym every single day, and every time I go, I lift a little less weight than I did the day before. Am I going to get stronger or weaker?
Not at all.
I mean, it doesn't work that way. The body adapts under stress. So lifting weights is stress. You have to stress the muscles and allow for adaptation to take place. Now, you got to do it in a smart fashion, right? You got to do it in a calculated way. You got to do it a scientific way, but you have to stress your body. You have to also stress your mind to grow. You have to stress physiologically, biochemically, emotionally, all of that. The stress of being an athlete is tremendous, but you got to figure out how to handle it. You can't shy away from it. So that's what I teach. I teach people how to rise up to the challenge, adapt to the stress so that they can become great.
Wow, that's really impressive. And from that research, who have you Can you talk a little bit more about that and some of those greats that you've studied and how they kind of adapt to that stress?
Sure. I mean, like, I met a guy named Bo Eason. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He played football in the 80s. His brother, Tony Eason, was quarterback of the New England Patriots. This is a long time ago. I'm older.
Okay.
And so anyways, he was a safety. Bo Eason was a safety.
Mhm.
And he enjoyed this is back in the days where you could lead with the helmet and tackle. You would spear people. It's not allowed anymore. But I learned a lot about stress and athletics from him. I mean, he would, as a child, as 8, 9, 10 years old, he'd get up in the morning, go run backwards, because he said, if I want to be a safety, I need to be able to run backwards as fast as you can run forward.
Yeah.
So every morning he's outside, rain or shine, whatever, running backwards. Now, isn't that stress? There's tremendous stress there. It's the greats who invite it and go after it. And then he ended up being drafted first round by the Houston Oilers. And they're now the Tennessee Titans, if you don't know the Houston Oilers. If you had ever watched Kobe Bryant play basketball, if you had shown up to the stadium earlier, like 4 hours before a game, he'd be the only one on the court. And his practices were really strange because he wouldn't just dribble and shoot. This guy would just step back and then look at his feet to see if he's behind the three-point line. And he would just do that for like 45 minutes to an hour. Mm-hmm. And then he would do something else. And he would learn the court, keep his eyes on the basket, and he would know where his feet are.
Yeah.
I know from reading some books, Michael Jordan's trainer used to, with him, they would walk up and down the court every game, every stadium they would play in, and they would see if the ball bounces the same in every part. So he would know there were areas where they lay the court, the wood, where the ball doesn't bounce as high as other spots, and they would memorize that. I mean, how many athletes do you know do that stuff? But it's going above and beyond. And then obviously there's teamwork. There's Phil Jackson, 11 championships in the NBA, right? He used to make his team sit down and practice breathing. Breathing is so powerful. They would learn to breathe together, because if you can breathe together, you can play together, because you need to be in sync. You need to learn each other. Why is it that Jordan couldn't win a championship until Phil Jackson showed up? And Kobe couldn't win a championship without Phil Jackson. That's why they brought him back. So it's doing the little extra things. So let's say you're an athlete, you got a lot of stress. Recovery is key. You train hard. So I'll tell you, I know some MMA fighters. I'm not going to name them, but these guys do heart rate variability tests. So if your heart rate variability is in the green and you go to train, you train so hard you're puking in the trash can in the back. But if your heart rate variability is low, and the reason this came about was these UFC fighters would get hurt 2 weeks before a fight, 3 weeks before a fight, and then they'd either had to forfeit the fight or they would have to fight injured. And they're trying to figure out, why are they getting hurt? Well, it's because training has to ramp up. Your training partners, your sparring partners are going to get tougher and tougher and tougher. So now you're sparring against some really tough guys, and that's when they got hurt. So they tried to figure out, how do we prevent these injuries? They started doing heart rate variability tests. And you can get a device at home. You can wear around your wrist. You can put a ring on. It'll tell you, it'll connect to your phone. But if their heart rate variability was high, if it was in the green, they would train hard. They would spar hard, they'd train hard. If it was in the yellow, they'd say, okay, you haven't recovered from last workout, so we're going to do a light workout today. If it was in the red, they'd send them home. You're not training today. Go home, rest, relax, recover, come back tomorrow. That's when we'll train. And all these injuries were able to be prevented. So it's about recovery. First thing you have to do is figure out if you're recovering. The type of heart rate variability test we do in my office tells you whether your body is resting in fight or flight or in rest and repair, because sometimes the body gets stuck in fight or flight. If you've ever been in that state where you're trying to fall asleep, but thoughts keep rolling around in your mind and you just can't slow down your brain to fall asleep, we call that wired and tired. You're tired, but you're also wired. So you can't fall asleep, but you're exhausted. Well, it doesn't make sense, right? If you're exhausted, you should fall asleep pretty easy, unless the body is stuck in fight or flight. That's a neurologic state. So there's types of breathing you can do that shifts you out of that fight or flight so you can get the proper rest. You're going in for a big game tomorrow. You're nervous about it. It's the body thinks you're being chased by a pack of hungry wolves. Now, can you lie down and take a nap if hungry animals or predators are chasing you? You can't. You're going to run and you're not going to be sleepy. So you've got to shift your body. Slow exhale always shifts your body out of fight or flight. So you count to 5 when you breathe in, count to 10 when you exhale. Okay. Make sure you're counting in a rhythm, and you do 10 of those, you'll start to fall asleep. Powerful. Okay. When it comes to recovery from injuries, sunlight is powerful. Early morning sunlight. Go stand in the sun with as little clothes as possible, depending on how cold it is. Where we both live, it gets cold. But you know, early morning sunlight has UVB rays more than UVA. UVA is what makes you tan and can burn your skin. UVB doesn't do that, but it helps your body heal and recover. What's cool is when you're stressed, like if I go work out really, really hard, the next day my cholesterol is going to be high. Now, I did the study at NIH, National Institutes of Health, where we did cholesterol testing on people every single day. And cholesterol fluctuates by 20 points, plus or minus, day to day. So when you get your cholesterol checked, that doesn't mean anything. It's just where it was on that day. It's like your blood pressure. It can go up, it can go down, like your temperature. It can go up, it can go down. Your body monitors that through the nervous system. If you're stuck in fight or flight, high stress, you're nervous, let's say you're driving in rush hour traffic every morning, every night, coming home, whatever it might be, or you got a coach or a boss that yells at you all day, your cholesterol is going to be high because your liver will produce more of it. Now, that sunlight I told you about takes the cholesterol, converts it to vitamin D. Okay. So again, it's powerful. Now, vitamin D helps your muscles, joints, and your mood. It makes your bones stronger, so you recover better. Red light is powerful. If you know someone who's got red light beds, I've seen people recover from sprain strain injuries that were supposed to take 6 to 8 weeks. They recover in 2 to 3 days. Wow. Incredible, powerful. That's incredible. Oh yeah, recovery. Now, I'll tell you one more thing. Napping. You know, most people think napping is for old people. It's actually not. They call it a beauty rest because it keeps you young, because it releases growth hormone. Now, we know that a lot of athletes will inject growth hormone just to recover injuries, and things heal much faster, body composition's better, you preserve muscle, you grow bone. Growth hormone is powerful. If you take a 10-minute nap in the afternoon, close to 4 p.m., you get a spike in growth hormone. Okay. Wow. So that's another tip. Very powerful. Here's one more. How you eat is more important than what you eat. So athletes all know, hey, I got to eat the protein. I got to watch the macros, you know, whatever your goals are, however you want to eat, whether you're a power lifter or a bodybuilder or you're a wrestler trying to cut weight, whatever it might be, you know what you should be eating. But if you eat in the wrong state of mind, that food is not nutrition in your body. Because what we know from fight or flight is if you're nervous, scared, upset, worried, anxious, your immune system shuts down, and so does your digestive system. Not, I mean, shuts down, but it slows down quite a bit. Those are the people where the food sits in their stomach and it ferments and it rots. And by the time it gets in the intestines, it's not nutritious anymore. So you could have eaten the greatest food, but you're not going to get the most benefit out of it if you ate it in a state of mind where you're nervous, scared, upset, anxious. Wow. So you have to calm your mind. Do the breathing exercise if you have to before you eat. Now, if you're in the right state of mind, your nervous system's ready to receive food properly. Now you eat the food, even if it's not the best food, your body pulls all the nutrients out of it and uses it. Wow. Phenomenal. And here's the proof. The proof is, it's called the French paradox. The French paradox refers to France. In France, people are immune to heart disease and obesity. If you go to, and I spent 3 weeks in Paris, stayed with a friend of mine who lived there. We were hanging out with the locals. And if you ever saw someone who was overweight or looked sick, it was usually a tourist, not a French person, not a local. Okay. And then the difference is this. There, if you're eating at a restaurant, it takes you 2 hours to eat. You don't rush the food. And if you tell the waiter to bring your check when the food comes, or bring the check early because you're trying to catch the movie, they spit in your food. I mean, it's very, very disrespectful. In kindergarten, we tell our kids, hey, stop talking, eat faster. In kindergarten in France, they say, stop eating so fast, talk to your friends.
Wow.
Complete opposite. Because if you eat with a friend, instantly that food is more nutritious for you.
Wow.
Especially if you enjoy being in that company. Now, if you can't eat with a friend every single day and you're having lunch, you're busy, here's what I do. I see hundreds of patients a week. My practices, we have 3 doctors on our team. I own 2 offices, 12 employees, and sometimes we get so busy, I only have 10 minutes to eat. So what I'll do is I'll play some classical music right before I start to eat. I'll sit down at my desk. I put my food out in front of me. I act like I have all day. And I start eating slow. And when time runs out, I pack it up, I put it away, because I know I might get less food that day, but I know whatever I got is going to be nutritious, as opposed to trying to get as much in as possible. That's not going to be good for us.
Right.
So
That's
anyways,
really interesting.
yeah,
And it's practical to, do it that way. And I think the breathing exercise, especially for young people, is something that a lot of people overlook. And how you eat is something that I never even knew was something that could be beneficial.
absolutely. Absolutely. Now, all of the information I'm giving you, and I'll share whatever you need, but everything is written down in my latest book. It's called Cracking the Stress Secret: How to Turn Pressure into Power.
Okay.
And it's available on Amazon, every bookstore. It was a #1 bestseller in 4 different categories, #1 new release when I came out last October. Anyways, there's a lot of stories in there, a lot of stories about other patients that we've had in our practice, as well as my personal stories growing up in the war in Iran during the revolution, all that stuff. So if you get a chance, you're interested, if this is going to help you, pick up the book and send me a note. Let me know you got it.
I will. Great. Well, hey, thank you very much. Very insightful conversation, and looking forward to learning more about how this can all help athletes and myself too.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right. Thank you.